crafty peeps, and welcome to Stamp Week. Before you get super excited, this is not in fact a craft room tour. I just figured I'd come on since it's Stamp Week and show you like my wedding bonnet is covering everything else. But I figured I'd just come on and show you how I actually have my stamps organized since it is in fact Stamp Week. I do have a craft room tour somewhere in the pipeline that will eventually happen. But for now, here is how I have my stamps organized. So I keep all of my stamps that are alphabets or numbers or days of the week or months of the year, things that I would reach for Project Life. I keep those all in this basket. And then these other two baskets are stored and organized. That's the word. Organized by manufacturer. So I have all my Feed Your Craft stamps in the front. This is a really awkward angle, you guys. I'm going to do better when I'm actually doing the craft room tour. I have Felicity Jane, Feed Your Craft, Kelly Perky, and Kerry Bradford Studio. In this one, I have some stamps that I was naughty and didn't put back where they belonged. In this one, those go over there somewhere. And then in this one, I have all of my Allie Edwards stamps. I have a few of my larger Ellie Studio stamps. And in the very back, I have my Studio Calico 6x8 stamps. And the other thing I want to show you is how I actually organize my inks. Now, I don't have my studio lights on right now, so the lighting is really bad in here right now. I promise when I finally get around to doing the craft room tour, I'll have the lights on. If you follow me on Instagram, you might have seen this already, but here's how I organize my inks. So I have my inks, my ink cubes organized by rainbow order, and they are in this organizer from Amazon. This is 2 of the 4 drawers that I've organized. So I've stacked 2 of them. I have all my 1-inch cubes on the top, and then I have distress inks here. I have my chalk inks here. And the one other thing I'm going to show you before I flip the camera around and go top down is where I keep the rest of my larger ink cubes. So we're going to go slowly down here so I don't give you shaky cam. All of my Distress Oxides live in this unit here. And again, if you follow me on Instagram, you will have already seen all this footage. All of my Distress Oxides live in this unit here. I keep my Mega Date stamp from Studio Calico here. And then I have my my mini archival inks here, and then on the very bottom down here, guys, when I tell you I maximize my space in our apartment, I really do. So on the very bottom down here, I have my Allie Edwards Color Theory, the few scrapbook.com inks I have a few archival inks, and because I wasn't prepared to film this video, things are not all in the place where they should be, but I just did want to come on and show you my stamp storage. So I'm going to stop talking, we're going to go top down, and now I will show you the project for today. All right, Scrappy friends, what is up? Welcome to day 1 of Stamp Week. For today, Allie decided that we were going to be focusing on using alphabet stamps on a layout. And my favorite way to use alphabet stamps on a layout is to stamp a huge title. If you've watched me scrapbook before or you've seen any of my projects, you will have seen me do this, but I love to stamp, I'll grab my one little word album because that's nearby so I can show you what I mean. So, like this. So this is one of my favorite ways to use alpha stamps. So just stamp a huge title. I like to use the Educational Insights, those stamps for kids. That's my go-to stamp because it's just really easy to stamp out a quick title. But I've used other stamps before, and so I'm going to do what I know works, which is stamp out a big title. But I have my jelly plate on my desk because just because it's Stamp Week doesn't mean we're not going to keep things interesting. So I have a few things out on my desk right now. I'll show you the photo. So I said in my intro video where I talked about Stamp Week that Allie and I were going to be doing these projects in real time to show you how long it takes to actually stamp out something. So stamping out a title does take a while. So I will have to figure out something to talk about. Some of you guys left me some questions and so you guys had some stuff to talk about, so I will hopefully remember to do that. I am not feeling my best today, so bear with me. I have a list of questions though, so I will eventually get to them. So here's a picture I'm scrapbooking. I am working in my Life Crafted album by Citrus Twist, so that's a 5x8 album. And winter here in New York City has just been a nightmare. Literally rain and cold every day. On the bright side, we didn't get any snow, so I guess I should be grateful for small favors. But rain and cold and misery every single day. So that picture, I finally saw some sunshine and I like freaked out a little bit. I was like, oh my God, does that mean that like this crazy winter that has been making me sick is finally about to wrap itself up? And so I thought it'd be fun to scrapbook that photo. And since this is me we're talking about, we are making a rainbow because it's not a Tatiana layout if there's not a bunch of color somewhere. And this is, I didn't contaminate that ink too badly. The Distress Oxides are my favorite inks for making rainbows. Oh, so some of you had some questions about types of ink. I did have to do a little bit of Googling because I'm not like a stamp connoisseur where I know everything. But tomorrow, because I have a list of things to talk about. Tomorrow I will be talking about the types of inks because I know some of you had questions on the different types of inks and what's better for what. As far as Distress Oxides go, these are my favorite inks to use for mixed media, and you can stamp with them. They take a little bit of work to get a really crisp impression, but you can stamp with them. But the difference with the Distress Oxides, I need a little bit of paper towel. The Distress Oxides are a hybrid pigment and dye ink mix. So they have all the cool things that we like about dye inks mixed with pigment. So because they're a pigment dye ink blend, you can, I'm rolling off my brayer on paper towel. Because they're a pigment dye ink blend, you can put this on top of dark cardstock. You can put this on top of color cardstock. So you can put this on top of craft paper. I think I lost my purple and my blue towards the bottom. So I'm just going back in and adding some more of it. Yes. So, and the other thing about, because they're pigment and dye ink, is you can layer on top of them. And once they're dry, that wasn't what was supposed to happen yet. I'm like mixing up my steps. You can layer on top of them, and once they're dry, they do not blend, so you do not get mud. So you can put like red down. If you know anything about like color theory, you know like red and green or blue and orange or complementary colors. You can layer them and you won't get mud. So that's the cool thing about the Distress Oxides. They are my favorite ink to use because they are stupid pigmented. Okay. So we're doing some jelly printing today, if you couldn't tell. I am making a rainbow background for my stamping. So I just went in with, stop it, stay there. I just went in with some Distress Oxides, and then I added some water to my background, and I'm using Basil cardstock because the Basil cardstock can take a bit of a beating. It's not like watercolor paper, but it can take a bit of a beating without completely buckling and falling apart. So let's see what our print looks like. Perfect. So here is our background. I'm going to set this down to dry. So you see we have our rainbow, and I'm going to blot some of that extra water up with paper towel where it's pooling. We did lose a little bit of the blue in the rainbow. It looks like it went straight from green to purple, but that is okay. All right, so we're gonna leave that, let that dry. I'm going to go off and clean my jelly plate, and I will be right back. Okay, so here is my jelly plated colored panel. It is warping a little bit, which is expected because I threw a bunch of water at it, and it is not watercolor paper. A few things I've learned about if you have a warped paper, if you heat set it and you heat set both sides, that helps with the warping. Also, you can just run it through a die cutting machine. If you do die cuts, that will also help. I had my die cutting machine out because I have a bunch of these flowers that I die cut to embellish my page. These are from this die from Altenew. It is the Layered Floral Elements die. I will, as always, link everything in the description box. Okay, so now we're gonna actually work on the stamping, which is the purpose of this week. So my title is I've Got Sunshine on My Mind. And one of my favorite things to do with stamping alphabets is to mix stamps. And I like to mix typography. So I find that like a really long, skinny stamp looks really good layered with something that's like a scripty stamp. So I have this stamp from I'm just gonna be upfront. Nothing I have is available anymore. But I have this stamp from Kelly Perky. This is the High Line. It's really long, skinny alphabet. And then I have this stamp from Sweet Sassy Stamps, and it is the Rebecca Script Alpha. It's designed to mimic like hand lettering, which I like a lot. And then I'm looking for scrap paper because you always need scrap paper when you're stamping. Here we go. I have archival ink. So I know another question a lot of people have is what ink should you be using? If you are working on a surface that you've added any sort of water to, or that you plan on, I'm looking for a pencil, that's why I'm making so much noise, or that you plan on adding water to, you need to make sure you use an archival ink. Archival inks are waterproof. The other ink you can use if you need a waterproof ink is StazOn. StazOn is also waterproof. I just prefer archival to StazOn. So that's what I go with. If you're not planning on adding water, then you can use, just want to make sure that's going to erase. Okay, good. If you're not planning on adding water, you can use any ink, like any black ink you have. I just prefer, like I said, because I do so much wet stuff, I like StazOn and archival ink. So all I'm doing right here, because I want my title to be close to centered, it is probably not going to be perfectly centered, and that's okay. But because I want it to be close to centered, I'm just drawing a few guidelines. I will go back and erase these once my project is dry. But now we're going to start stamping. So my plan is to stamp, I've got sunshine in the middle and then on my mind. What else did I want to say? Oh, so the other question a lot of people had was how to get a good impression for your stamps. So a few things. The first thing is, what surface are you stamping on? I actually have a full-size stamp pad. I just have no idea where it is right now. I'm in the process of overhauling my craft room, and so I just don't know where it is. I will find it by one of these videos and I will show it to you, and I will link it in the description box. But your surface, like what your paper is on, makes a world of difference. This I stole from the inside of my Misty, and that's what I use when I'm in a pinch, which is like all the time, and I don't know where my actual stamp mat is. I know some people have had success stamping on mouse pads. So I know some people have had some success stamping on mouse pads. I don't really like mouse pads because I don't think they're thick enough for what I need them to do. The Misty pad, because it's designed for stamping, does exactly what I need it to do, so it works out really well. So the other thing I found for stamping is if you give your stamp a little bit of a roll when you stick it down, I feel like it's hard to, I'm gonna have to do better with coming out with explaining. I'm actually gonna write out what I'm stamping first because I just wanna make sure I don't spell anything wrong. Okay. So I find that when you're stamping, if you give your stamp a little bit of a roll almost, also you have to prime your stamps. So I've seen people prime their stamps a few ways. You can prime them with an eraser, which I could do because I have an eraser on my desk. I just like to rub my stamp on the back of my hand because the oils on your hands will prime a stamp. Also, you can just stamp on and stamp off a few times. Ooh, I almost dropped that on my project and made me sad. But you see the way I apply my stamps, I put it down and then I kind of do like a little rocking motion. I don't know if you can see that because I just realized I'm wearing my giant bonnet and it is probably covering this entire frame. But when you're stamping, you kind of have to get up close and personal with your project. So you guys are just going to see a lot of my giant bonnet because at this point, it doesn't make any sense to take it off. You've probably seen it already. So same thing. So now I'm just going to work on my title while I figure out what else to talk about and answer a few more of your questions. It would be easier if my cardstock wasn't warping and bending and like buckling and doing annoying things, but we are making progress, so it's okay. So the reason I put a line down the middle of my page is because I want my title to be as close to centered as possible, and I'm going to draw vertical lines horizontal lines to help me anchor my stamps. So if that's something you need to do, that is not something I always do. If you've watched me stamp before, especially when I use those kid stamps like the Educational Insights, I don't bother with the guidelines because I want those to look messy. Like I like the messy look for those. But for this, because I'm going to be mixing fonts and I want it to be really centered, it helps to have the guidelines. So with this stamp, because it's really skinny and mine's kind of old, my letters are kind of wonky. So like my E isn't perfectly straight. I kind of like that. If that's not your cup of tea, then just make sure you pick a stamp set, like a font that is going to give you what you're looking for. Also, the acrylic block size matters a lot. If you don't need to use an acrylic block as large as the one I'm using, like I have acrylic blocks in all sizes. I have this tiny little circle one, which I'm going to use for the script letters. That won't really work for the font that I'm using right now because these are so long. But using a smaller block will help give you more control as you're stamping, and I think that might make a world of difference. And make sure your ink pad is nice and juicy. Nobody wants to stamp with a dry pad because that just makes things even harder than it needs to be. Okay, so I've gotten the first line of my stamp done. I'm gonna go in and add an apostrophe because this will drive me nuts if I don't put one. Quickly just priming my stamp on my hand, stamping it off, and adding an apostrophe right here. Perfect. Oh, I like that so much. Okay, and so I have my rainbow paper and we're gonna keep going. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go pull up some of your questions and so I can start answering them. So I found my phone that had some of your questions. And let's see if I can answer them. So someone was asking about when is the best time to replace inks, and that is kind of a personal preference. Here's why I say that. I don't mind when my ink starts skipping. I know that might drive some people crazy, but I kind of like that rough texture. So I don't mind when my ink starts skipping. If you're trying to get, so this is my second archival ink pad, because I had to, oh, there's something all over these stamps. This is my second archival ink pad because my last one started skipping to the point that I could not get recognizable impressions anymore. So that's what I would say. If you're stamping and you have to like dip your stamp in your ink like a million times to get an impression that you like, it's probably time to replace them. Okay. That worked out really well. So this stamp set is designed, like I said, to mimic hand lettering. So it has the down stems and like little flourishes, I guess, coming off each letter to show you how to connect them. So for this particular stamp, it is just going to take me a few more seconds to get it right because that's not right anymore because it was supposed to be connected. And I didn't connect the letters, but we're just gonna go with it because I'm not making a new background. Yeah, so the purpose of this stamp is so that the letters are connected so it looks like script. Every time I use it, I manage to ruin it. I don't ever get it like perfectly right, which again, is a personal preference. Does that bother you? It might. Does it bother me? Not really, but let's see if I can get this U and this N to connect. Okay, so see, that's how it's supposed to look. See how like the U and the N look like script and they're connected? I got that one. I probably won't get any of the other ones together. Someone else asked if I could do an ink comparison, and that's actually a pretty good question. I have not nearly as many of my inks as I should, but I have a few of my inks swatched. So maybe later on in the week, I can show you swatches, or we could do live swatches. So I can pick like a relatively filled in shape, like a circle or something, and just stamp it in a bunch of different inks to give you the comparisons. Because there are, right now, as far as I know on the market, there are pigment inks, there are dye inks, there are hybrid inks, which are pigment and dye inks, there are the archival inks, which are waterproof. There's a lot. There are a lot of inks on the market, and depending on what you do with them, that's going to decide. I just got my glue everywhere. That's going to help you decide what ink you use. Now, I am not, unless this is your first time here, you might not know this, I am not a neat crafter. I get ink all over my fingers every single time. that might drive some of you crazy. So I'm not the one to ask about like the way to get neat stamping and to avoid getting inky fingers, because I mean, I'm covered in ink already. So I don't mind getting inky fingers, but that might drive some of you crazy. So I wish I had tips for you for how to avoid that. I would say just don't stick your fingers in your ink, and don't do what I do, which is when you get ink everywhere else, wipe it on your fingers. I always had baby wipes and paper towel on my desk, and I just choose to use my fingers as rags anyway, even though I have a bunch of stuff to clean it up. So see, here's what went wrong. So I didn't start my sun as far to the left as I should have. So now it's leaning more to the right. On the bright side, I can fix that, because I have this little stamp set from Ali Edwards that has a sun. And I had it out on my desk just in case this happened, because I had a feeling this was going to happen, and I know myself. So I'm just going to quickly pop a sun right next to that S, and that is going to fill in that gap and kind of make it look intentional. So now I just got to put a few more suns. So I'm going to put another sun up here. And then when I finish putting on my mind, then I can pop one more sun in there, and that will fix the mistake I made. Here's the thing about stamping. There are no real mistakes. There are just opportunities for... My E's escaping. The way I feel about stamping is there are no real mistakes. There are just opportunities for creativity. If you are a perfectionist, I don't know if stamping's for you. I mean, don't get me, there's ways to be a perfect stamper. I do not have them. I'm going to be upfront. I'm not. That's not my thing. What I am is a person who does not give up and who tries and tries and tries again. That's what I am. So if you don't mind making mistakes and not having things go exactly the way you wanted them to the first time, then I would just say, just try it out. You might, I'm going to put on this side and mine this side. Okay, you might make something you fall in love with. You might learn something you didn't know before. Like, that's my approach to crafting, is we're all learning, right? Some of us, nobody came out of their mom knowing how to make a perfectly embellished project life spread. Like, no one did that. Everybody started somewhere. Everyone scrap lifted someone. Everyone, like, you know, took a few classes maybe and practiced. None of us, see, I tried that a million times and I still managed to ruin it. Okay. None of us knew what we were doing until we tried it. So we all make mistakes. I just say, use your mistakes as opportunities to learn. I'm covered in ink already. Use your mistakes as opportunities to learn and to improve. If you want to improve, maybe you like the messy look. Like I said before, I do not mind when my stamping skips, which is why I use ink pads well past the time someone else, like if you're a card maker and you're going for that like perfect look, then you wouldn't want to use the ink pad past when it starts skipping. But that's not my aesthetic. I don't mind the gaps in the stamping. So I'm just finishing up my sentiment. And this is how long it takes to stamp a title. I saw someone in Allie's Facebook group post about how it took her 3 hours to stamp out a title on a 6x8 page. That would not be me. She said she made like mistakes with like spacing and everything else, and I would have just been like, all right, that's cool, and I'm gonna keep going. I'm all about finished is better than perfect, because no one's going to look, I highly doubt anyone's gonna look at your albums and go, oh my God, her stamping was not perfect on this day. I can't believe this ended up in her album. So I just say, do it, get it done. So you see, as I stamp, I'm doing that thing that I was talking about where I use both hands and I press down on the stamp and kind of rock it back and forth. If you were using a smaller stamp set, like I was using with that scripty font, you don't necessarily need to do this, but since this stamp is so long and so thin, I find that the way to get the best impression is to do that rocking back and forth. And on this side, I'm going to go backwards just to kind of make sure that everything is spaced evenly, which helps because I put my lines down. Now I'm going to let this dry probably overnight before I erase the lines, because I don't want the archival ink to smudge. Archival ink dries really, really fast. But we're not going to take any chances here, because the last thing I want is to have my ink lines smudged everywhere. So I'm going to let this dry before I go in and erase it. But if that's one of your barriers to stamping, that you're worried about getting things down straight, just put down some light guidelines in pencil. That's a really easy way to give yourself a grid. Like I said, I went down the middle of my page so I can kind of make sure things were centered. And then I went down, I just drew myself some horizontal lines to work on. Okay, so I got one letter left, and then we're just gonna work on embellishing this page and giving myself a few lines for journaling. I'm going to do my journaling right on this stamped panel, which is why I left myself some space towards the bottom. I did die cut. I can't talk in stamp. Oh, this O is crooked. I gotta fix that. That's gonna be horrible. Okay, that looks better. Okay, I did die cut a bunch of flowers from that all to new stamp set, and that's just gonna be the only embellishment I use. And I might add some chipboard somewhere. Okay, so that O came out a little bit wonky, and that is my fault more than anything else. Again, I'm not very gentle with my stamps. I probably should be. They would probably be nicer to me if I was nicer to them, but I'm not. Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and just put a period. I have ink all over my fingers. Perfect. All right, so there is my alphabet stamping done. I don't even know how long that took. Probably really long. Oh, I do want to add one more sun right about here. Perfect. Okay, so I got my 3 suns, and we're gonna just clean up a little bit. Okay, so I cleaned up my desk a tiny bit, and I went ahead and arranged my floral clusters on my page. I always do things in groups of 3, so I mean, you probably knew that if you've been here before, but I just went ahead and I kind of arranged my flowers the way I wanted it. And then I did that thing that I always do, which is took a picture of it on my phone so I can go ahead and rearrange my floral clusters. And then I'm just going to add some journaling to this page, and then we are about done. The stamping definitely took the longest, but it is pretty impactful. I think it's like the most impactful part of this spread. So you kind of want it to take the longest, like you want it to be the neatest. But that's the good thing about stamping on a layout, is once you get it done, that tends to be the hardest part of the whole page. So once it's done, everything else is just kind of nice and easy. So it's probably going to take me like 2 minutes to go ahead and glue all these flower bits in, and then I'm going to probably do a little bit more embellishing. I'm not sure what, but so I'm putting all these flowers in the top right corner of my photo, and the reason I'm doing that is because the purpose of the photo, the purpose of the photo was to highlight that the sun was rising, so it's right here. So I don't mind covering all these bits and pieces of the, I don't mind covering all the, like the top corner, just because it's not crucial to the story that I'm telling. So I'm just gonna go ahead, glue all my flowers down, and then we will reconvene and finish up this page. Okay, friends, so here is the completed spread. I went ahead and added some journaling in my, I love these Stabilo pens for journaling. They are a 0.4 tip, so they're a really, really fine nib, which are my favorite pens for journaling. And I added some journaling in gray ink at the bottom, just as I didn't want it to take away from the spread, but I wanted to make sure I got the words on the spread. And I just talked about how this winter was never ending, so it was really nice to see the sun. And then I added 2 bits of chipboard. I really want to add a 3rd one, because you know how I am about things being in groups of 3. So I might put, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to switch this yellow one. If I can get this off. Oh, it came off perfectly. I'm going to put this yellow one over there and put another blue one down there. I just have a thing about things in groups of 3, and I was staring at it and it was driving me crazy having just the 2. So I'm going to add a second, put the yellow one there, put this blue one down here. And now I have my 3. Perfect. Okay, and this is just from the surprise chipboard, which is an older story kit from Ali Edwards. It is one of my favorites. It's one of my go-tos because I use these colors a lot, and it's really easy to just pick up a quick phrase and add them. I have my big stamped title, my big photo, and that completes the spread. I love how bright and colorful it is, and I love having the florals everywhere else, and I think it looks really good together. So that is day 1 of Stamp Week. Come back tomorrow and every day for the rest of the week, and I'll have a few more stamp tips and show you how you can use stamps in your memory keeping. So that's all I have for you today, guys. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you're so inclined, and I will see you tomorrow. So until next time, keep it crafty and have the best day. Bye!